My brother destroyed my laptop right before my thesis deadline, and my parents thought it was funny. I was just 7 days away from turning in the most important document I'd ever worked on, my master's thesis. That laptop held months' worth of sleepless nights, weekends powered by way too much coffee, and endless pages of detailed research. It wasn't just a machine to me, it was my lifeline. The last step between finishing my academic journey and stepping into the career I'd poured everything into. But before I dive into all that, let me say this, I've noticed the channel's been slowing down a bit lately. If you're here and you like these stories, hitting that subscribe button is the easiest way to show support. It's fast, it's free, and it really helps keep this community growing strong. Money was always tight. I lived simply, scraping by on part-time jobs between classes. Paying rent was already a stretch, cloud backups or a spare laptop weren't even on my radar. Still, I was proud of myself. I was building something from the ground up with my own 2 hands. Oh, and the usual YouTube thing. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Anyway, that's when my brother came storming into my room, pissed off because I wouldn't give him a ride to some party. I kept my cool and told him no, I had to focus on finishing my thesis. He let out this bitter little laugh and said under his breath, "Oh, you think you're better than everyone just 'cause you're in school?" I should have said something back, but I didn't. I ignored him, and that turned out to be a huge mistake. A few minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of something shattering. My heart sank. I ran into the living room, and there it was, my laptop, completely destroyed, pieces scattered across the hardwood. The screen was cracked right down the middle, the keyboard ripped off, and the body of it bent at this awful angle. My brother just stood there over it, arms crossed, looking way too satisfied. "Oops," he said, like it was no big deal. It slipped. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. I dropped to my knees, staring at what was left of all my work. Every file, every draft, gone in an instant. I turned to my parents, tears in my eyes, hoping they'd back me up. But they didn't even blink. My mom actually laughed and waved me off. "It's just a computer. Don't be so dramatic." And my dad? He shook his head, clearly amused. "Kids these days and their digital nonsense. You should have printed it out like people used to." I felt like I'd stepped into some twisted nightmare. The people who were supposed to have my back were sitting there, chuckling, while everything I'd worked so hard for was lying in ruins at my feet. And to top it off, they didn't even bother hiding how much they favored my brother. He just shrugged and said, "Maybe next time. Don't act like you're the only one who matters." I didn't say a word. I left the room in silence. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I just sat there in the dark, my heart pounding, fury bubbling up inside me. And right then, I made up my mind. This wasn't going to be the end of my story. It was the start of my revenge. I scraped together every dollar I could find. I pawned my guitar. I skipped meals. I went to my professor, practically begging for an extension. I spent night after night in the computer lab, living off campus computers, flash drives, and Google Docs like my life depended on it. Because honestly, it did. But while I was piecing my thesis back together, I was also working on something else. My brother's party boy act? That was about to blow up in his face. I started keeping receipts, literally. All the crap he'd bought on my parents' credit card, fake IDs, booze, even the cost to replace a window he smashed during one of his wild nights that he'd blamed on a neighbor. My parents never gave it a second glance. But I did. And I waited for the right moment. The day I finally handed in my thesis? That was also the day I sat down with the dean's office. Not to talk about me, but to report a certain student who'd straight up copied an entire assignment. My brother. I'd found the original online. Honestly, it couldn't have been easier. My parents? They had no clue what was coming. But they would soon enough. After that, I kept my distance from my family for a while. Not to make some dramatic statement, but because I needed all the energy I had just to rebuild what they'd tried to tear down. And while I worked my butt off to finish that thesis on my own, my brother strutted around like he was untouchable. My parents kept treating him like he could do no wrong, completely blind to the storm that was about to hit. The night I submitted my thesis, I didn't break down from sheer exhaustion. I cried because I'd made it. I'd rebuilt everything he'd tried to destroy. But I wasn't done yet. See, while my parents were busy patting my brother on the back for pulling off AB or for not wrecking the car that month, they never once acknowledged how hard I'd fought to make it to graduation. Not once did my parents ask if I was okay after the whole laptop disaster. Instead, they bragged about how they'd spent money upgrading my brother's car stereo, and they even threw a barbecue to celebrate him for, get this, staying out of trouble. Meanwhile, I was barely holding my life together with nothing but sheer willpower and a mountain of frustration. But you know what? Sometimes fate gives a little help to those who refuse to give up. My thesis? It got picked for a national award. I was invited to present it at a big conference out in Chicago. They covered everything: flight, hotel, meals. I didn't bother telling my parents. I just packed up my one decent outfit, got on that plane, and stood in front of a room full of professors, innovators, and professionals who actually saw me. People who appreciated what I'd done. They clapped for me. They respected me. But the high didn't last. I came back home the next day, and it was pure chaos. Turns out my brother had been caught cheating again, but this time, it wasn't just school. He'd submitted a plagiarized article to a local magazine, using my name. I found out when the magazine reached out, asking if I wanted to make edits on my piece. I did some digging and sure enough, it was copied word for word from some obscure blog. He hadn't even tried to change it. I confronted him calmly, showed him the evidence, plain as day. And he just laughed in my face. No one's gonna believe you. You're the dramatic one, remember? But this time, I wasn't just the dramatic one. I was the one with the proof. I had the credibility. I had people in my corner. So I sent a full, detailed report to the university board, the magazine's editors, and I made sure to loop in the ethics committee too. But here's the twist, the final hit didn't even come from me. Remember all those charges my brother racked up on my parents' credit card? The fake IDs, new tires, gambling sites? I'd quietly collected every bit of it, screenshots, receipts, timestamps, all organized in a neat little digital file. And on top of that, I discovered he'd forged my signature to open a $2,500 student line of credit. That wasn't just him being reckless. That was straight up fraud. So I took it all to the bank, this time backed by legal counsel from the university's free legal clinic. They opened an investigation right away. My brother got summoned, and my parents totally freaked out. My mom started crying, telling me I was tearing the family apart over a little money. I looked her right in the eye and said, no. He did that when he tore my life apart. And you laughed. They scrambled, trying everything to shut me up. My dad offered to settle it quietly. My mom begged me to let it go. Family comes first, she said. I just stared at them and said, I am family. You're the ones who forgot that. It went to court. My brother tried to play the mental stress card. My parents tried to shift the blame onto me, said it was my fault for not telling them sooner. But I came in prepared. I had emails. I had screenshots. I had receipts. And I kept my cool while they sat there stunned. I wasn't out for blood. I wasn't looking to see him behind bars. I wanted justice. I wanted him to feel what it was like to rebuild from the ground up, the way I had. So I asked for full financial restitution. I wanted the cost of the laptop, the price of recovering my thesis, the fraudulent credit, every last dime. That totaled up to $75,000. And the judge agreed. My brother's accounts were frozen. My parents were so desperate they actually offered to cover it themselves. They even said to him, you owe her that much. She's the favorite, after all. That was it. That was the final nail. That's when it hit me they didn't see me as their daughter. I was just a means to protect their golden boy. So I walked out of their lives. And the next time they tried to call me, they got an auto reply, this number is no longer in service. Please contact your favorite child instead. 6 months went by without a word. My parents didn't reach out. My brother called once, trying to guilt me for ruining his future. But I'd had enough of people who only remembered me when they wanted something signed or silenced, never when I was crying for help. I packed up and moved to a new city. Landed a job at a think tank where they actually paid me what I was worth. Where my ideas mattered. Where they respected my name. But fate? It wasn't done with my family just yet. One night, I got a call from a woman named Hannah. She was the editor-in-chief at this up-and-coming investigative journalism outlet. She said she was working on a story about academic fraud linked to, you guessed it, a certain university. Apparently, my brother's name had popped up in connection with all kinds of shady stuff, selling plagiarized essays, forging recommendation letters, the works. That journalist, Hannah, had come across the court records and saw my name listed on the transcript. I'd really like to hear your side of this, she said. At first, I wasn't sure. Part of me wanted to just let it all fade into the background. But then it hit me staying quiet is exactly what had let them get away with so much for so long. So I agreed to talk. I didn't trash anyone. I wasn't looking to stir up drama. I just told the truth. I shared how my academic future was nearly destroyed by my own brother. How my parents laughed it off, stood by him, and let me drown, only begging for forgiveness once the legal system stepped in. The article blew up within days. The title? Family Loyalty or Family Scapegoat. One woman's fight against toxic silence. My old professor shared it on social media. People I hadn't heard from in years, former neighbors, old classmates, even teachers, started reaching out to me with messages of support. That chapter of my life had started with me, 1 week out from submitting the most important document I'd ever written, my master's thesis. I'd poured months into it, sleepless nights, weekends fueled by coffee, and page after page of painstaking research, all saved on that one laptop. It wasn't just a device to me. It was the bridge between everything I'd worked for in school and the career I was trying so hard to build. I lived cheap, barely scraping by on part-time jobs between classes. Rent was hard enough to cover. There was no chance I could afford cloud backups or a spare laptop. But I was proud. I was building something for myself, piece by piece. Oh, and the usual bit. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. Anyway, then came the night my brother stormed into my room, ticked off that I wouldn't drive him to some party. I kept my cool, told him no, explained I had to work on my thesis. He scoffed at me, muttering, "You think you're better than everyone just because you're in school?" I let it slide. That was my mistake. Minutes later, I heard the sound, something shattering. I ran out to the living room and saw it, my laptop, smashed to pieces on the hardwood. The screen cracked right down the center, keyboard torn off, the body bent in this awful way. My brother just stood there, arms crossed, looking smug as hell. "Oops," he said. "It slipped." I couldn't breathe. I fell to my knees, staring at the wreckage. Every file, every draft gone. I turned to my parents, tears streaming down my face, desperate for them to care. But they didn't even blink. My mom gave this little chuckle, waved me off. "It's just a computer. Don't be so dramatic." My dad smirked, shaking his head. "You kids and your digital nonsense. You should have printed it out like people used to." It felt like I'd fallen into some nightmare. The people who were supposed to protect me? They were laughing while everything I'd worked for crumbled at my feet. And the worst part? They didn't even try to hide that they favored him. My brother just shrugged and said, "Maybe next time, don't act like you're the only one who matters." I left the room without a word. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I sat alone in the dark, my heart pounding, rage burning through me. And right then, I made up my mind. This wasn't how my story was going to end. This was where my fight back began. I scraped together every dollar I could find, pawned my guitar, skipped meals, begged my professor for an extension. I pulled overnight shifts at campus computer labs, working off flash drives and Google Docs like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. And while I was rebuilding my thesis from the ground up, I was quietly building something else too. My brother's party boy image? It was about to go up in flames. I started collecting receipts, real ones. All the stuff he'd charged on my parents' credit card, fake IDs, booze, even the bill for a broken window from one of his wild nights.